One. Welcome back to another dispatch from Hollie McKay. Today we're going to talk about the drug of drugs that is the big killer in America, fentanyl. And Hollie has done a bit of investigation into it and the cartels and found a very disturbing link. Tell us about this, Hollie.
I've been tracking the fentanyl crisis now for a number of years, and it just blows my mind how many Americans are dying every day. We're talking about an average of 120 Americans every single day dying from fentanyl or something related. Often we hear the word drug overdose. But it's sort of not quite accurate when it comes to fentanyl. Often Americans are dying from more of a drug poisoning, and often it is fentanyl, which is it's sort of 100 times stronger than morphine, if you can imagine how strong that must be. And the cartels are now sort of using it to fill their drugs. So, and this can be in anything from a fake pill that you or a prescription that you get from an online pharmacy that's not through your doctor. Fentanyl is sort of being laced into those packed pills. It can be in cocaine, it could be in heroin. There are even been situations where they've been put in children's lollies or candy. There's also been situations of it being in marijuana. So it can pretty much be in things that are very unsuspecting, and there's no way for you to see it or to tell that something may be poisoned with fentanyl. And it's a cheaper way for the cartels to kind of get their drug full without having to use the full product. And mind you, the tiniest little bit of fentanyl can kill. And that's why we're seeing just so many Americans die. I mean, there was a situation a few weeks ago where there was, I believe, 6 people in an apartment that must have been using some form of a drug, and all of them died because that particular batch had been poisoned with fentanyl. I think it's also really important to acknowledge that the precursors to make the fentanyl actually come from China. So there is this very strong relationship between these sort of Chinese gangs that come from a lot of these sort of pharmaceutical supply companies and are able to get the fentanyl. And mind you, there is medical grade fentanyl. So you may be in a serious sort of pain dilemma and your doctor may offer you fentanyl at the hospital. But that is very different from the fentanyl that we're talking about that is killing Americans. So these Chinese gangs basically work in cohorts with the Mexican cartels to supply these precursors. And then it's from there that the cartels use it to put into a variety of drugs that I just mentioned. And these end up in the US border. And really, the statistics are absolutely shocking, and they're going up and up and up every year. The Trump administration did sort of try to curb it a little bit by acknowledging a state of emergency. And for a little bit there, that was in 2018. And then for a little bit in 2019, it actually did drop for the first time in decades in terms of drug overdoses. But we're seeing this sort of just from the COVID time, really just this huge ascendance. And now this is a killer that is killing more young Americans, sort of between the age of 18 and 35, men, than accidents or suicide or other sort of things that used to be at the very top of that list. So it's extremely disturbing, and I just don't hear a lot about it. And there doesn't seem to be sort of huge campaigns, huge awareness campaigns. And it's affecting people in absolutely every city. But I think when the media and other people are so concentrated in large cities, we forget about the flyover states. And this is also where a lot of the addiction is, and where a lot of the fentanyl deaths are happening. And it's, for me personally, I mean, every few weeks I hear of somebody that I know or somebody close to somebody I know that is dying from this. And I just think this is a huge national crisis that we really need to be doing a lot more about.
Yeah, okay. Well, so for those of us to keep our ears to the ground, I, I, one of the other things that disturbs me about this particular problem is you do hear complaints about fentanyl, particularly at the border states, and people in the legislatures in and around there, depending on who they are, wanting to pay attention to it. But it's wrapped up in this whole border immigration and the politics of it. And so this the fentanyl problem itself is lost in this ocean of other political issues, which frustrates the people that are in the communities that are suffering from it. But I haven't seen any movement or leadership out of the federal government in particular, or out of the media as a an amplifier of the problem to treat that. And the consensus so far is that it's because nobody wants to touch the immigration problem. And so, how do you get this particular thing to get more attention without tripping over the other issue that gets in the way of the reality of this
I
problem?
mean, it really is a matter of finding out what to do with the cartel problem. And it is a problem. And the approaches that we've obviously thrown at it over the past 20 years are not really working because this problem is getting worse. So I think there needs to be a lot more sort of thinking and strategic creativity in trying to work through the problem, whether that's sort of a deeper relationship between Washington and Mexico City, or there needs to be a broader crackdown. But something needs to change because it is horrific. And I think just also from an absolute kind of awareness point of view, I mean, there's just no drug that's safe. And that I don't know what the, I mean, there needs obviously needs to be a lot more education and awareness in that too, and cracking down on that. I mean, it used to be, I mean, it was never my scene, but certainly, when I was growing up and going to clubs and things, when people were doing whatever drugs that were popular in the clubs at the time, um, are a lot safer, I suppose, than they are now because you just don't know that the drug that you're taking is actually just the drug that you're taking, and very little way of proving otherwise. And I've heard stories of situations of people that, just thought that they were doing a little bit of marijuana or something or cocaine at a club in Los Angeles, and then ended up dying immediately because it was, in some cases, pure fentanyl. I lost a very good Afghan friend of mine last year in San Diego. Thought that, was smoking hashish or hookah, and somebody had put something that they thought was similar to hashish, which is very common in Afghanistan, in it, and of course that sort of killed him immediately. So it's everywhere, and it's so I think there's still so much stigma attached, and I think the only way that we get through is releasing some of that stigma. And then you also have to look at some of the underlying addiction problems. So oftentimes people they get a sports injury, they go to the doctor, and the doctor gives them opioids. And if we remember a few years ago, doctors were very freely giving opioids out. And now that there's been a huge crackdown on that, those particular people can't go and get their Vicodin or their Oxycontin anymore. So then they're turning to the street drugs. And that is really what is the huge sort of danger element. And it's not just fentanyl. It blows my mind again that there are so many other things that are now found in these street drugs that are also coming in from the cartels. And you're looking at, I mean, there's a horse tranquilizer, I can never pronounce it right, xylazine, and that is, it's meant for veterinarian use, and now suddenly that is also turning up into street drugs, which is also incredibly deadly. And you've got ISO, another drug. So it's this endless thing that keeps coming out. So I don't know that there is a way to necessarily stop it all, but certainly I think there's a lot more we can do to at least get a grip of it and increase that awareness to some degree. And it disturbs me that it is claiming so many American lives, and we just don't hear enough about it.
Yeah, no, we don't. And it's a frustration to anybody that pays attention to what the cost is, because we know that it is permeating through the system. We know that it's killing innocents who don't even realize it was one thing when people died from drugs who knew consciously that they were taking something dangerous, but this is it's the behavior of the cartel system at this point is it doesn't really mind killing people in order to make a buck, and that's a very big
No,
difference from what
yeah.
it was before.
And people think, oh, but aren't they killing their clientele? The demand for drugs is so high, and the addiction rates, unfortunately, are so high, and they've skyrocketed since the COVID pandemic, that the cartels are really not worried about killing 100 or so, quote unquote clients every day, because there are plenty more that are sort of waiting in the wings. And I think in the immediate term, all we can really do is say there's just absolutely no safe drug. There just isn't, unless, I mean, there's just not. And there's really no way of testing these drugs to see how pure or they are. Um, so the more that can be done to kind of stop people from even sort of experimenting, that in itself will save lives.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that sounds like an educational process that is still waiting to start. Thanks for the report, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.